Susan Rice is extraordinary. Couldn't be prouder of the job that she's done at USUI.
That was President Obama today at his first cabinet meeting since winning re-election. Today, Ambassador Rice received this praise from Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
Susan Rice has done a great job as our ambassador to the United Nations. Of course, this decision about my successor is up to the president.
Today, Republican senators continued to try to open up a Massachusetts Senate seat that Scott Brown could run for.
I think John Kerry would be an excellent appointment and would be easily confirmed by his colleagues.
If the president wants an easy confirmation hearing and an easy confirmation process, what he would do is nominate John Kerry, who is eminently qualified to be Secretary of State, and I believe he would sail through in the nominating process.
Joining me now, MSNBC's Ari Melber, a former national staffer on John Kerry's 2004 campaign. Ari, you're coming to us tonight from Kerry country in Boston, and I've got to think this is a horrible moment for Senator Kerry. You don't want to be the guy who gets praise from the mindless attackers of Susan Rice.
Yeah, I don't think he wants any part of this very weird boomerang play the Republicans are openly trying to practice, and he's made that very clear publicly by defending Susan Rice. He knows her well because as chairman of Foreign Relations Committee, he oversees the State Department, looking at the diplomacy and the ambassadors and working with Secretary Clinton and Ambassador Rice.
Well, today, Ambassador Rice continued her meeting. She met with Republican Senators Susan Collins and Bob Corker. And here are the lies that those senators told after the meeting.
I continue to be troubled by the fact that the UN ambassador decided to play what was essentially a political role at the height of a contentious presidential election campaign.
I would just ask the president to step back for a moment and realize that all of us here hold the Secretary of State to a very different standard than most cabinet members. We want someone of independence.
Okay, Ari, that's Bob Corker lying about these mythical standards for Secretary of State. And Susan Collins, Condoleezza Rice, as Secretary of State, campaigned for George W. Bush. I mean, this is crazy stuff that they're talking about.
Condoleezza Rice, after Stanford, was a political advisor to George W. Bush, and it's not a problem as long as you take the role seriously. The expectation is about what you do once in office. I do think it's sad. I also think it's a misunderstanding of the Senate's role, what some of these Republican senators are saying. They do have a role to advise and consent under the Constitution. They don't have a role to block and filibuster endlessly. When they have tried to block nominees for political reasons, I would point out it has boomeranged on them. That's why Elizabeth Warren from this state is now in the Senate, because they played so many games thwarting her nomination. She ultimately withdrew and did them one better. She knocked one of their colleagues out. I don't think that is the same, of course, the same situation here. But again, you showed the clip just earlier of the president praising Susan Rice. She was in the cabinet meeting in that footage because Democratic administrations typically make the UN ambassador a cabinet-level position. Republican administrations typically do not. They make it a sub-cabinet position answerable to the Secretary of State. And again, that goes back to the fact that there's some very different historical views here about how the parties look at the UN and its role for diplomacy. But there's no doubt that the president knows Susan Rice, has had confidence in her over the tenure, and if he chooses to go with her, it will be continuity in his foreign policy.
Ari, what's the talk in Massachusetts about a possible Senate race if John Kerry will go into cabinet? Because there's still speculation that he might go to defense if he didn't go to state.
Yeah, you hear this about defense. The folks I know who've worked for John Kerry, past and present, are much more focused on the fit with the State Department should he be asked, because that is, of course, what he oversees on his committee. He's qualified, I think, for both positions, just like he's qualified to be president, but they're not as focused on that. If he did vacate, the problem in Massachusetts is that Scott Brown did just spend a lot of money on running, and there aren't as many big candidates out there that are seen with statewide potential.
The last word's closer. Ambassador Ari Melber gets tonight's last word. Thanks, Ari.
Hey, thanks, Lawrence.